Hello everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews. Today we're doing another Hong Kong review for 88 Films' new lineup for Hero, the 1997 version, not to be confused with Jet Li's The Hero from 2002, which I haven't got around to seeing just yet. That's on my list for sure. So yeah, this is a brand new release from 88 Films, a really nice kind of deluxe edition. Surprisingly produced and kind of, backed from kind of Shaw Brothers. The fact they were doing movies all the way from the early kind of 60s all the way to kind of the late 90s is really fascinating. I need to actually dive into more kind of late 90s kind of Shaw Brothers kind of production releases. How far do they go? Do they go all the way to the 2000s? When do they stop making films? When was that last ever movie they produced and kind of backed? I'm very curious. Also release date is Human Lanterns, another kind of Shaw Brothers movie, spooky movie. I've heard nothing but good things about this one. Really hoping this one pays off, because a lot of the kind of spooky kind of Hong Kong movies can very, very hit and miss. But for today we're talking about Hero 1997, which is a loose remake and reinterpretation of the box set from Shanghai, which I recently did a review for on the channel from the Shaw Brothers Volume 1 box set. But yeah, Hero, a really fantastic release from 88 Films, part of the kind of, Asian cinema collection, which is fantastic. This is spine number 35. I'll show you there. There's the fantastic artwork on the front there, back there. And of course you get the reversible original poster, which I think is okay. I think it's decent enough. Yeah, it's mysterious enough. There you go. Just give you a little bit of this, in case you're wondering. And of course you get the booklet, and you get a poster as well, which is the kind of both the original poster and the kind of brand new artwork as well. But here's the booklet, and you get all your goodies there, which I'm looking forward to checking out. So without further ado, let's dive into Hero 1997. As mentioned, Hero was released in 1997, directed by Yuen, who did one of my favourite films of all time. It is Dragons Forever from Jackie Chan, The Dragon Trio, which is getting a brand new kind of 4K release later down the line. He's also done a couple of Western movies with Van Damme and Jason Statham with The Transporter, and also done one of my favourite films ever, which is Righting Wrongs, which I'm really pumped to get finally. Very interesting director, not a guy that kind of does the most safe, easy projects. He definitely is very experimental. He definitely is pushing boundaries a little bit. Probably not as well recognised or well kind of established, maybe. I think he might have been in Eastern Condos, not too sure, but I definitely recognise him from his kind of performances. He was not as established compared to someone like Johnny To or kind of Wong Kar-wai, for instance. He's definitely a very interesting, kind of definitely on the map director for sure. Someone that I've surprisingly watched a lot of his movies more than I thought to have, and each one has been not the safe, easy kind of project. They've been quite interesting, quite different. And going into Hero, I didn't know what to expect exactly. I knew it was a remake from the original 70s film, which that was a very interesting, quite dark kind of, tale of a kind of a tragedy of a character that rises to be a gangster and then loses it all in the process. A very dark tale, a moral compass kind of tale in the sense of, be careful what you wish for and the consequences of your actions. It's a very kind of dark, kind of specific kind of movie, which definitely reflects a lot of the time, I think during 70s movies kind of thing, because a lot of 70s, early Shaw Brothers movies were very kind of very nasty. There's a lot of very devious villain characters, a lot of betrayals kind of thing, a lot of the kind of the setups and kind of the scope of each of those kind of Shaw Brothers movies, especially if you look at One on Swordsman and then from Shanghai's kind of directed lineup. How would he adapt this kind of story to a modern setting, from a 90s kind of late 90s modern setting? Which direction do you go in terms of tone, in terms of characters? How do you keep the violence? Do you make it more fluffy? Do you make it more lighter? What style, what approach is this? And I saw the trailer for it, and I thought, wow, this is going to be John Woo's kind of insane kick-ass action. And I thought that's an interesting take to go into in that sense. And then I finally watched the movie just recently, and the film was very different from what I expected. The trailer did not do it justice. It just took all the best action scenes and stick it in a trailer, made it more look like a John Woo movie. It's got elements of a John Woo type film, but it's definitely not, I would say, going in, and it's definitely not like the original, even though it just has similar beats to it kind of thing, and does kind of cherry pick ideas and the kind of the setup. It's kind of taking the blueprint and basically just doing its own thing. Hero, I don't know where to start with here. This is a very interesting film, and it has a lot to kind of offer and a lot to kind of present. One thing I'll say straight away is that I actually really enjoyed this film. I thought it was actually really fantastic, and I thought it was a really fun ride from start to finish. Even though there is a couple of things in there that I wish they could have done a little better. I think there's a few things they could have not skipped as much, and I think this is the opposite of what the first one is, because the first one's 2 hours and 20. It's quite a long film. It's definitely a slow burn. It's definitely building up its characters. As this one is a 93-minute film. It's definitely a much shorter film compared to what the original was, and crams in I think just about the same amount of story beats and the same type of kind of, you know, point by point like the film version did, but adds in different elements, adds more comedy, adds more kind of lighthearted. I would say Heroes are definitely a lot more of a flashier 90s film in terms of the kind of the editing, in terms of kind of like the way it's kind of shot and presented, the camera work. It's like so deliberately over the top. I think the fighting definitely isn't as strong in this one compared to what it was in the original, but it makes up for it for batshit crazy kind of action set pieces. All the action in this film is very memorable. It's very stylized. It's very kind of quick cuts. Even though it is very kind of has a lot of editing choices in it, it's still very much the sequences do flow quite nicely. All the action is very rememberable. You can see what's going on. You can see where characters are. Even though it is doing kind of that kind of really fast paced kind of, you know, insane kind of wire work, and, you know, has lots of weapons and kind of guns and characters doing insane backflips and that kind of stuff. It's definitely a very crazy kind of over the top, over stylized movie deliberately, I think a little bit for the style of it kind of thing, than I was expecting to see, and it's great. It's really, really fun, especially when you get to the third act. But I think ultimately what this film is, I would say this is less like a John Woo movie, more like a film like Miracles, much more of a Jackie Chan kind of inspired kind of movie. It's definitely going for that more kind of light-hearted, more fun kind of Jackie Chan kind of spirit. I would say very similar to kind of Miracles in the sense of its tone, in terms of where it's kind of taking its time, it's setting up some of these characters. Even though it does skip a couple of beats, there's a few kind of characters that do a bit of a 160 on terms of their characterization and points, but it kind of gets back to the point a little bit as it goes. It kind of, a character needs to do something for something else to happen, and, you know, while those moments in places are a bit kind of melodrama and a bit kind of like, oh, okay, we're doing this now kind of thing, it never kind of lost my intention for 1 second. And I think that's the benefit of the film. It definitely is got a lot of energy. It's definitely got a lot of passion, and it's definitely much a fan of the original. You can tell that it's got the story beats. It definitely changes a few things up in terms of what the original was. You know, the style of the film is very different by itself. It has a bit of a narration about, you know, the British and kind of like, you know, different fractions, all these kind of different families, you know, different turfs kind of thing, and that adds a bit more kind of idea of the reason why our main character with his brother are leaving kind of, you know, Shantung kind of things, because of basically a war's broken out, in terms of like, you know, there's a bit of a refugee, he's a bit of a refuge kind of thing, and he's going into a different land, and he has to find work, he has to find kind of his own kind of path, and he has to kind of, you know, he wants to prove for himself. He definitely is a similar kind of characteristic from the original, but nowhere near the level of villainous. I'd say he's definitely a lot more kind of charming. He's definitely a lot more kind of, you know, out there kind of fun nature, Jackie Chan kind of inspired kind of thing character. He definitely is a lot more kooky and has a bit more of a sense of this one. He definitely wants to do the same things, but he goes about it in a much different way, and there's much more focused on the love interest this time around. There's definitely a lot more politics in the film than I expected to see. Also, the different kind of rival gangs kind of thing. You got Yuen in the film also, which is a much bigger role compared to what the character was in the original. In the original movie, he was very, very limitedly used in the film. In this one, he's definitely a lot more of a kind of a brother kind of figure in this one, more of a mentor, more of a friend, more of a kind of a supporter. So it's about this kind of like friendship and this kind of honourable, respectful nature of these two characters, and they kind of have a lot going on in the film also. They definitely, even though they do meet a little bit of odds towards the kind of the second and third act, you know, they definitely are best friends in the sense of, you know, they definitely will support each other, and, you know, they both come from similar backgrounds in that sense. I think that aspect is fantastic. Yuen in the film also, he plays a really fantastic character. He's also someone who is part of the head boss. He's someone who's been doing this for a very, very long time. He has a lot of power, a lot of pull, and you've got various other characters that basically want to steal his turf and kind of want to challenge him, and you've got very devious kind of characters in the middle. One thing I was very happy while watching this film, it has the same level of kind of violence and edge compared to the original did, and especially towards the third act, he goes full on like nasty John Woo kind of style and kind of, you know, practical effect nature of it kind of thing in terms of its violence, in terms of its action, and definitely has more of a kind of a looser kind of wire work kind of feel towards in terms of the action and the set pieces. What I see in the film, there's a lot of comedy in the film. There's a lot more kind of jokes and kind of, you know, fantasy sequences. There's a great sequence towards the kind of third act when he's kind of recovering and he has his kind of daydreams, or kind of like he's being lied to. Have this kind of outlandish kind of, you know, comedy sequence, and the fact that I've seen these characters do very villainous, you know, nasty stuff, and then seeing them do the most impossible kind of other end of it. The film definitely wants to be much more light-hearted, definitely wants to be a lot more fun, a lot more entertaining, definitely has some edge, definitely has some violence, and definitely has a lot of high consequence. This one definitely has a much more of a traditional kind of, you know, sense of kind of redemption and kind of honor and respect, and, you know, classic bad guys being bad guys kind of thing. There's some great lines and sequences in the film also. There's definitely much more of a focus on love interest this time around, you know, the singer, which in the original he never could actually be with her and never got her respect and never got her kind of chance to kind of have his moment with her in the film. That was the tragedy of that character kind of thing. He's someone who, you know, he had the kind of status, he had the persona, but he could never be with that person he wanted to be because he knows that would be a risk factor in his kind of plan. And all this leading to one of the most crazy, insane, batshit, genre-inspired action set piece ever. It is insane. This one has a lot of heavy gun work stuff. The third act is just non-stop explosions and suicide bombers and just kind of, you know, epic machine guns and cannons and bamboo sticks, epic death kill bamboo stick kills, which is great to see. Overall, Hero 1997 is a very different approach to kind of the original movie, where the original was a lot more of a kind of a darker, much more of a personal villain character story that realizes he can no longer carry on and he has to kind of face the consequences of the actions he's took in the film. Definitely much more of a darker, somber movie, but has a really interesting kind of, you know, journey for a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, something very different from Schwarzenegger's film. This one is much more of a kind of a Jackie Chan Miracles, more modern 90s kind of approach, more likable characters, much more interesting kind of, you know, set characters in a circle kind of thing. Has a lot more comedy elements to it as well, in terms of fantasy sequences, in terms of just, you know, ludicrous kind of, you know, slapstick in places here and there kind of thing. Crazy, kind of flashy, over the top, just interesting kind of action set pieces that just have so many different types of editing choice arcs. It's cheesy, it's melodrama, it's over the top in places. The music is just really, really funny, but also it's fun at the same time. It basically just takes the blueprint of the original and just applies a very different type of feel, different tone, a different kind of modern approach of the 90s approach to that story. So yeah, Hero 1997 was an absolute blast to watch, and I really, really enjoy watching. What are your thoughts and opinions, guys, on the remake? Do you prefer the original? What do you prefer? Do you like both? So in the meantime, this is Amphlett Reviews.